mein Liebe. And the word love, in English, to love, comes from the same etymological root. So it's the love force, what Freud called the libido. It's in all of us. We have this love force, libido, which is where we celebrate life. And it's often helped by a little glass of wine or something like that. And why shouldn't it be? This is the God of life. And the word life, by the way, is also related to this same root. Lieb, love, and life all come from the same etymological root, which I discovered when I researched my dictionary of philosophical terms. And yes, of course, so life is the noun, love is the verb in English. And it's really quite interesting. So Liebe is the god of all this stuff. So during the French Revolution, they went through a Liebe phase. And they wanted liberation, liberty. So in France, we say liberty, equality, and fraternity. That's the three symbolic colours of the French tricolore. And it's the slogan of the Republic of France, which I'm honoured to live in. And the French people, a lot of them were Freemasons around that time of the 18th century doing their revolution, which was not supposed to get violent. That was all a mistake. And it was taken over by the dark forces. The real revolutionary intellectuals wanted a peace transformation from an old corrupt ancien regime to a new, modern, liberal constitution where everybody had rights, you had freedom of speech, you had freedom of livelihood, which is also related to Liebe, and whatever wealth you had, the plebeians, the poor, were also to be protected. And that was Marx's idea, but he was a bit of a fanatic. He didn't fully understand the spiritual meaning of liberation and liberty, and he knew nothing, so far as I know, about the god Liebe. He never mentions him in his writings. He was ignorant when it came to ancient religions, sadly, and it's cost the world dearly. But, so the good news is that Liebe lives on, and I hope and pray that, in Israel and Palestine there are people celebrating with a glass of wine or whatever it is, a glass of mint tea if that's your thing, the freedom, the liberation of all these hostages on both sides. We're having a Liebe moment, celebrating that release and that freedom for those poor people that have been captured and held in prison on both sides. I've met Palestinians who, I'll tell you a story. I was once walking through the streets of Bethlehem some years ago, back in the mid-90s, when there was hope in the air and peace, and Rabin was around, and we had an Oslo peace process, and we still believed in the possibility of rational solutions to this problem. And I met a young boy in the streets, he can't have been more than 15, in Bethlehem. And he became my unofficial tour guide. I was with my then partner, Diana, and we walked around and listened to his story. And it was a very sobering story. I hope he's all right. He'll be now, like 35. I hope he's still alive and surviving, and maybe one day he'll hear me recount this. He'd been walking around the streets of Bethlehem a few years previously with his best friend, a bloke, not causing any trouble, just out and about, There's nothing to do. He explained to me the problem is we're sealed in here. We can't go to the beach because we're not allowed to go to Gaza and do swimming. We can't go to Israeli beaches, not allowed into Israel. Can't even go to Jerusalem because there's so many checkpoints you can't get through. I don't have a passport. He said all I've got is like a Palestinian identity card. I can't go anywhere really outside Bethlehem. And even in Bethlehem you keep getting arrested and stopped and searched. So, what kind of a life is it? Anyway, he'd been walking around. Maybe he was age 13 or 14, with his best friend. They were out and about in the streets of Bethlehem, not causing any trouble. And an Israeli military guy stopped them. Where are your documents? Who are you? With a gun, right? Like, what are you doing out? Well, we're just walking about, so we live here. It's Bethlehem, it's our home, we're just out and about. Okay, none of your cheek. Where's your documents? and the one chap, the guy I met, fortunately he had his identity papers. He gave them to the officer. All right then, where's yours? The other guy. I left them at home. I'm really sorry. Silly me. I came out without them. I can nip back and get them. Oh, no, you don't. And he shot him dead. Just like that, for not having his identity papers. And he was killed in front of my friend's eyes, who was utterly distraught, obviously, and protested and said, what the hell, you just shot my friend. I want to complain officially. This wrong. What you've done is wrong, illegal. For that, he was himself arrested and put into Israeli prisons, where he stayed, I think it was 2 years. For most of 1 year, it was in solitary confinement. This is a young kid, 13, 14, who'd seen his best friend shot and killed. He protested. For that, he was then in prison for 2 years, right? And then he was released, and now he's back on the streets of Bethlehem, and he told me this story. And I couldn't believe it. It was like, now that's why they're upset and protesting. It's like, when the reality of it hits home. So some of those people that have been arrested in the system, for doing little things, I'm glad some of them have been released. I would like all the Palestinians to be released and all the Israelis on both sides. And I'd like a full, proper peace conference negotiation to negotiate and agree a two-state solution to this whole problem, giving the Palestinians enough land to make a viable state. Rebuilding Gaza with Commonwealth money will help rebuild it. Canada, Britain, Australia, rebuild it. Give them a port and an airport. But it has to be non-violent. The two states would make a pledge for all eternity not to attack each other. And that includes Israel has to stop attacking the Palestinians. They have to stop arresting and shooting people, like that friend of mine story. And that's been going on in the West Bank really badly. So Lieber is saying, yes, thanks for that liberation of hostages. Now let's have more. And then let's liberate each other from this tragedy. This is like a story of two brothers that are fighting. And in fact, you see, Muhammad is a descendant of Ishmael, who was the eldest son of Abraham. And the Jewish people are descended from the other son of Abraham, Isaac. And so it's two brothers' descendants fighting. The Christians came along and said, well, it shouldn't matter like which branch of Abraham's family you are. In fact, Christ said, before Abraham came along, I was. In other words, he was from an even earlier spiritual time of Liebe, of true love, before family quarrels mattered so much. So anyway, that's my reading of these two cards. Liebe, and it's got the French Republican flag up, which is the threefold symbol of Liebe. And during the Revolution, people used to wear these hats, Phrygian hats, which symbolised Liebe as well. Lots more about liberty and liberalism. I really don't like the way the word liberalism has been misinterpreted in America. And in certain forms of discourse, it's become a bad word, and everyone's anti-liberalism. Well, I think that's a mistake and a misreading. Read about Liebe, because you can't build social progress without liberation, without human rights, without freedom of speech, without authentic liberal values. What's happened in the Republican right in America is they've inverted the meaning of liberal. They now use the term as if it's like an extreme communist, someone that believes in, shooting their enemies. It's the complete inverse of the truth. And the people behind that, like Trump, are literally, they don't have any spare brain cells to understand what I'm talking about. So just to my American friends especially, I would say liberalism is not a dirty word. It's a very, very profound and deep intellectual move. Read Montesquieu and read the founding fathers of the US. Read Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin. These were liberals in the classic sense of the term, because they believed in freedom of speech and constitutional governance, which I do. They believed in democracy, which I do. And so, yes, you've got some homework to do. So that's Liebe. And, when you hear people attacking him, please come to his defence. And Macron, President of the Republic is carrying the energy of that. Let's hope wisely, because it's important. Right, okay, that's 2. Let's do another 2. That's the first 2. We love them, Liber and Dagda. Let's have another 2 and see what maybe new angle they shed on this.
Poseidon.
We haven't had him for a while.
For sure.
Poseidon. Yes, thank you. Ah.
Enlil?
Yes, we can have Enlil. Yeah. Right. I don't think we've had him.
I think maybe a month
Yeah,
or 2.
sure. Okay, so these 2 gods are quite useful for understanding what's going on. So Poseidon is a very interesting and amazing god, and I've got to know him through my many travels to Greece and also studying Greek classics and Greek philosophy. And Plato was a descendant of Poseidon. Plato is one of my favourite philosophers. According to his family history, he was a descendant of Codrus, who was the first king of Athens after Theseus. And Codrus was in turn a descendant of Poseidon. Okay, what does that mean? That's like the ancient Swedish and Anglo-Saxon kings all said they were descended from Odin. It's like an aristocratic thing, you know. My ancestors are God, actually. So what it tells us is that Poseidon was incredibly important to the ancient Greeks, and particularly to the Athenians. And there's a wonderful temple just outside of Athens, which I've been to, dedicated to Poseidon at Cape Sunion. It's one of the most beautiful temples in the world. I recommend it. Overlooks the sea. Classical Greek columns and all that. Greece loved Poseidon because their wealth and their intelligence came from the water, from travel. They were seafaring people. It's not a big land area, Greece. It's a bunch of islands in the most exquisite sea. But they all used to travel around and learn from each other. So the Greeks very early on were travelling into the Black Sea, travelling all around the Mediterranean, travelling to Egypt, which they fell in love with, and learning and learning and learning wherever they went. And learning mathematics, learning music, learning medicine, learning geometry from the Egyptians. And that's why philosophy began there. Philosophy is a gift of the sea. In the Philosophy Club we honour Poseidon because we know that without Poseidon there'd be no philosophy. And the greatest first philosophers, like Pythagoras, was a sea-born child. His father was Phoenician, his mother was Greek. And he went and travelled in Phoenicia, he learned in the temples there. He went to Egypt and spent many years studying and learning Egyptian spirituality. And he even went as far as Babylon and some say India. So, and his word for enlightenment is lucis, or lucis, meaning setting free. Lysis, the Greeks pronounce it nowadays, lysis. And it's the origin of the word analysis, which in chemistry means to analyse an element into its constituent parts by adding water, by liquefying something. And to analyse a problem in mathematics or geometry means to solve it. The word solve means to liquefy something. A solution is a liquid metaphor. So Poseidon is the one that brings liquidity into the most complex intellectual puzzles. And Pythagoras said, I've not come to teach but to heal. So what he would say about the Gaza war and the Ukraine-Russia war, he'd say, you need some more Poseidon energy. You need to liquefy this problem. You're seeing it from a stuck perspective. You're either X or Y, and you're fighting. No, we're all somewhere in between. We're X plus minus Y times square root of X. We're all complex mathematical formula which are an amalgam of all the X's and Y's that are possible in the universe. And we should take pleasure in analysing them all. you know, these Palestinians are amazing. The ones I've met, they're the most incredibly intelligent people I've ever met, with really complex life stories, family genealogies, descended from this prince or that Syed or that Sufi. And the only people that are that complex and interesting are the Israelis. I've also met many amazing Israelis who are equally sophisticated. And what Plato would say is, well, they're all children of Poseidon. You know, I mean, obviously Moses were doing Poseidon magic, or how could he have got the sea to part and walk across? You know, he had Poseidon on his help, and you know. So anyway, that's how I think Poseidon can help. And also, just to show why he's important, is that there was a contest once between Athena and Poseidon for who would be the chief god of Athens, which was like the intellectual superpower of the day. And some people said, oh, it's Athena, we love her, she's great. And others said, no, actually it's Poseidon, you know, don't tell anyone. And it was decided eventually that, and here's the four of water in my tarot of the gods. I'll just see how it was decided. I can't remember, was it a vote or did Zeus decide? If so, that's cheating, because Athena was his daughter, so of course he would choose Athena. Anyway, it was decided that Athena would win. I think the Athenians had a vote on it, being Democrats. They put it to the town council, because Athena gave them the olive, and they loved the olive because it gave light and food, and also she brought intelligence because she's the goddess of wisdom. And much as they loved Poseidon, they wanted wisdom even more. And that's why philosophy, when it kind of went inland, it landed in Athens. Before that, it was at sea. So, yes, I don't think you know, I'm grumbling that Athena was chosen as the patron of the city of Athens. I love Athena, and she's in the Tarot of the Goddesses, which I haven't written yet. So I think that the symbolism here is, whilst it's wonderful to worship Poseidon, and I'm the first to say that, we shouldn't get maybe too obsessed by the ancients, and we should accept wisdom as well, you know, and honour Athena as well. So there's a symbolic thing that sometimes people that over-worship Poseidon get too angry, like the sea can become too angry. It seems to me there's too much hatred and anger flying around in Gaza and Israel, you know, and justifiable anger at, look what they did to us, we're going to slaughter them all. This madness of Israel's response, killing 12,000 people because they killed 1,200. I mean, that's a sort of, I think, an unjustifiable, slightly crazy response. And Poseidon has also got that sort of slumbering, you know, revenge consciousness. I think I'm right in saying that in the Odyssey, the great Homer epic, that Poseidon really didn't like Odysseus and kept trying to cause trouble, so it took him 10 years to get back to Ithaca, to his wife, because Poseidon had a grudge against him. Whereas Athena protected and preserved Odysseus and eventually guided him back to Ithaca so he could be with his beloved wife, Penelope. It's a lovely story, and again, I think I'm supporting Odysseus in this heroic moment. As Ulysses was set in Dublin by James Joyce, so you know, we're all Odysseus trying to get home. We need to invoke Athena, which is wisdom. So if any philosophers in either Gaza, Palestine or Israel want to contact me, we'll work out a plot line whereby history has a happy ending. That'd be great. Yeah. Okay, now Enlil. The Seven of Air. Well, he's a storm god from the ancient Mesopotamian people, Sumeria and Babylon. And he's a bit Poseidonish. If you look at the card, he's whipping up a storm, and he's got a boat adrift on it, which is actually Noah's Ark, because he's the god that figures in the ancient story of Noah, which was in fact a legend or story from ancient Mesopotamia, where Enlil is from. And let me just find the page. Okay, page 346, right. Yes. So, he's associated with the wind and the earth and storms and the air. He used to be the chief deity of the Sumerians, who were the first sophisticated people with writing known to history. And they influenced later civilizations like Babylonia, Assyria, Akkadian, and they all adopted the worship of Enlil, even the Hurrians. He had a primary centre at a temple in the city of Nippur, which is in now Iraq. His name means Lord of the Winds. I find wind, it has many different moods, sometimes beautiful and soft and gentle, and it brings spring breezes. It can also be quite scary. And he's both. And it was Enlil who enabled Zisushtra, who is the archetype for Noah, to escape the flood, because he wanted mankind to survive. Enlil both causes the flood, but having sent the flood, he wants to preserve some of humanity. So he's both God and devil, as you would say. He's the killer and the survivor of mankind. There's a wonderful verse in the Quran, because I speculate in the text here. Did Muhammad know any of these ancient Sumerian Babylonian stories from the Semitic peoples of his ancestors? Probably not, even though he was well travelled and would have picked up lots that got in the Quran. But he knew enough. He knew that the gods came in different shapes and sizes. He wouldn't mind playing the Tower of the Gods with us. He was a very wise man. And in the Quran, through him, God says, call upon Allah or call upon Rahman. By whatever name ye call upon him, it is well. For to him belong the most beautiful names. This is from the Quran, Surah 17, verse 110, which is a very important verse. And what it's saying is that all these cards, all these gods, they're all different names of the one, the Absolute. And it doesn't matter by which one you invoke the Absolute, whichever one is Shiva or, whichever God, the Holy Trinity, because they're all variants of the one, the Absolute. Now that takes a wise man to understand that, or to be able to channel that down. Well, Enlil is another name for this one. And his father, An, was regarded as the supreme creator god, who has now gone off to the heavens. He created this planet and all that's here, but he's left Enlil in charge. It's interesting, probably Pythagoras and the other sages, when they visited Mesopotamia, would have learned these stories about Enlil. And kings regarded him as their model ruler. So if you were crowned as a king or a queen, you had to go to the temple of Enlil in Nippur to have your reign legitimised. Unless you went to the temple in Nippur and got, extra crowning from the priests and priestesses, you weren't a true king. Only if you honoured Enlil there were you accepted. Which is a sign of humility, because all kings receive their power and sovereignty from the divine realm, and therefore you go to the temple to honour that, which we have. When Charles got crowned recently as King of England, he had to go to Westminster Abbey and be crowned properly, or was it St Paul's Cathedral? No, it was Westminster Abbey, I'm sure. Anyway, it was a beautiful ceremony, and that was him saying to God, his name would be the Holy Trinity for Enlil, but he accepts all the other, religious paths as valid as Charles. I have met him, and I know that he has a deep tolerance for all faiths, as long as they're on, the right path, so to speak. And he has many good friends who are of all different faiths, which is right for a king. So I think he's been blessed by Enlil. So what we need are true statesmen, people of wisdom, to appreciate that you don't get power in life by attacking innocent people or killing them. That way you get recorded in history as a demonic ruler, as a crazy person. And that's going to be true of Hamas, but it will also be true of Netanyahu, who's led this mass slaughter of people. And I note with pleasure that many Israelis are now calling for his resignation. Before this truce ends, he should go, because he's now threatening to renew the attack. So what's his military plan? Is it to bomb entirety of Gaza and kill 2 million people? And then he'll somehow get in the tunnels, or will he just drop bunker buster bombs on the entire of Gaza and kill them all? I mean, this is a mad plan. I have called publicly for the Hamas people behind the attack on October the 7th to surrender and face a criminal trial in the International Court of Justice. If I was a mastermind of that Hamas attack, which I wouldn't have been, but just say, and with totally different karma, different life story, I might well have been. They were clever people who did it. Well, then they should have the morality to surrender and save their people. That's what I think. But they probably won't. So, so at least, I would like the Hamas leadership to resign en masse and the Israeli government to resign en masse, because both of them are not listening to wisdom, and they're causing suffering and grief to their people. Right. I'm going to stop there. There's so much more I could say. Enlil's sacred number is 50, which is a nice round number. And anger is never to be pursued. I'll just end with a quote from Aristotle, who's the patron of our philosophy club. He said, "Any old fool can get angry, but to get angry with the right person at the right time, for the right effect, for the right duration, and with the right outcome, takes intelligence." So that's, Aristotle would want to say that about all the anger of this conflict, the Middle East, Ukraine, Russia. Enough with the anger, people. Use intelligence. Find a peace settlement. Invoke Athena. Thank you.